Welcome to Techtastic, where we navigate the intersection of technology and business, uncovering innovations that redefine our world.
Renan Devillieres, welcome to It's Techtastic. It is so lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So you're in a space that I have a lot of passion around, and anybody who's followed me recently knows that I care a lot about the logistics and operation side of the house, which is often not the sexy part of technology. There's a critical need. It's really important. It's how the world works, but it's not the flashy whiz-bang stuff that we all get to hear about. And you run OSS Ventures, which seems to be investing in that space. Tell me more about that. Tell me why you chose that space.
So there are two big answers. The first one is just my personal story. I worked for 10 years in operation. I was a factory director or supply chain director. And then I created a tech startup and was lucky enough to make some money in the exit of that company. And so I just used my money to put tech in operations. So that's the historical way of looking at it. The second way, which is way more interesting for me, is operations is 25% of the world GDP, roughly. It's 0.7% of VC funding. So there's that enormous gap. And the world is needing badly innovation in that space. Innovation in atoms was not fast enough compared to innovation in bits. And there is incredible progress to be made there. And what I often say is, if you really want to solve climate change and the tensions in America and Europe over wages and cheap Chinese stuff and everything, we have to put technology in operations. And that's the way we're going to do it. And I dream of a world where robots are going to do a lot of the physical things and we are going to innovate in the physical world and we're going to change the world this way. So it's critical for me to put tech in there.
It's funny because my company does a lot of stuff around tech debt. And the vast majority of tech debt, when I think of it, I'll use my wife as an example. She has alphabet soup after her name, a lot of advanced degrees, certifications, all that kind of fun stuff, and heavily in the operation space. And what does she get asked to do, generally speaking, when she's brought into a company? It's not those things she has, those degrees for. It's usually to manage broken technology.
Yeah, of course.
Because at her level, it's a lot about reporting. That's where I think a lot of our underinvestment has been a huge gap. We rely on those systems to give us good data about how we're doing, but they're not telling us the reality on the ground so often because of the gaps in the technology itself and how fundamentally flawed they are. And you mentioned global warming and a lot of the risks that are coming with advancement of technology in general. There's risks that come with it. And the place that we've least solved are the places where the most people work, where the most of the jobs actually sit.
40% of all jobs.
Yeah. And that's where I personally started leaning in about 10 years ago, because I, like many technologists, was so enamored with the flashy, with the stuff that was right in front of us. But as you move your way deeper into the operations of any business, you find more and more opportunities. And I think I know why, a lack of willingness to invest there.
The relative contrast. Let me take some examples. Biggest companies in the world: Apple, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft. Arguably, 3 out of those 4 companies are operations company and their edge is supply chain. So if you invest right into those functions, the payout is massive. Mm-hmm. What is problematic is that the average line of code in operations is 24 years old, so they can get a drink. And when you have something that works, it's classic innovator's dilemma. You don't really invest that much because you're not seeing the next frontier of what a significant investment in technology in that part of your business could drive. And so that's, for example, what happened to automakers. If you're brutal, the amount of software innovation for the last 20 years in cars is 0. And then Tesla comes, and then the amount of innovation in software in cars gets to a lot. And self-driving would have never happened if there hadn't been a new player in the field. And so my personal take on it is that it's an ecosystem and we need disruptors to pave the way and do things differently and invest massively to show the way. And then incumbents have to catch up. And so they start investing. And so I'm an optimist. And so I think that there will be massive investment and opportunities in that part of the economy in the next 5 to 10 years. The last thing that happens is that the Chinese are outspending us in every capex category that you can think of. But Biden came and said, okay, guys, we are going big. And now we have chips coming back to the US. We have computers coming back to the US. And we have a 100% tax on electric vehicles coming from China, which will help.
So it came down to me to that exact point about the investment levels and the sunk cost fallacy that's often associated with technology. There's very real reasons to not worry about being pushed hard by a competitor and startup, because the amount of capital they have to expend to catch up when it comes to something in logistics like, I don't know, ocean shipping.
Yeah.
Every one of those ships is $100 million plus price tag, plus the port build outs and everything else. To disrupt a space like that requires massive investment.
Yes.
Right. And you're going to see that coming from a long way out, because as soon as they start asking for money, you're going to know about it. So a lot of these spaces have had no reason to really change.
Yeah.
I pick on that particular industry partially because I was TradeLens. And I saw it firsthand. The only innovations that have ever happened in the 3,000-year history of ocean shipping, or more, probably like 12,000-year history of ocean shipping, are no longer relying on Mother Nature to move our ships, right? We invented the steam engine.
Yeah.
And the introduction of the container in the 1950s.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're at a point now, though, where if you're not digital, full end-to-end visibility at least, you can't optimize, you can't predict, you can't do a lot of the things that are necessary for just baseline today.
Yeah.
And so everybody that works with those parties works around them. They get data from other paths, they come up with other ways of doing it, which is terrible because it's a very big portion of global trade happens in that one industry.
Yep.
So it's ones like that I look at and go, I have theory on how we disrupt the space like that, but I don't really know how we go after that hard. Whereas there's other places, the going around it pieces, where it's very clear how we do that.
Yeah.
And technology is such a big enablement. And when most people think of technology, they're really thinking about the computer and automation that comes along with it. But there's a lot of other technologies out there that have a potential to disrupt the space. And I'm curious what you think some of those most exciting ones are right now.
So the first is AI. Clearly, and above all other categories, there is a case where AI is bigger than the internet in terms of impact on global trade. And we really think that.
Yeah.
And the way we talk about it at OSS Ventures is very simple. Cloud and the internet gave us the way to reach anyone and any business on earth. And AI gives you how to replace people who don't actually do things. So AI. Yeah.
It's exactly right. But it's also one of those moments where it's like, I think that the future of AI for a period of time is largely a side-by-side enabling of the people to do a much better job, to be much more productive. But there is a point.
Yeah. There is a point. It's exactly like when there is a takeover from one company to another. First they say, we are going to work together. And 3 years later, there is only one company standing. So AI. Robotics is a very big category. And we think that robotics is going from rule-based to learning. There's that incredibly interesting company called Figures that is doing a humanoid general purpose robot. They struck a deal with BMW, and the goal is to automate 50% of the factory without coding.
Wow.
So self-learning robots. We think that this is going to happen for sure.
Oh, yeah.
The third is new materials and new processes. New materials and new processes are enabling us to do things that we could not do before. I have two stats that I love. The first one is that there are more scientists alive right now than the totality of scientists who died ever since Jesus Christ. So it means that the pace of innovation in material science is exponential. And with AI, we discovered in the last 20 years more materials than in the last 200 years.
I did not know that. That's amazing. So there's another one that I think is very interesting in this space that I actually don't hear many people talk about anymore, though it was hot about 10 years ago, which is advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, CNC machining, all the things that are related. Because for me, and I'm going to say the exact opposite of what I just said before, I actually think that's the way that we start to disrupt the global shipping industry and logistics as it is. Because my premise is this: marching forward, there's been this ever expanding desire from consumers for two things. I want the product now, and we're getting closer and closer to that. And the other is I want it custom. And those are in direct conflict with each other if you don't have something like advanced manufacturing.
So you're thinking of the synthesizer from Star Trek. And yes, there is one thing though for the synthesizer from Star Trek, which is one of the most counterintuitive truths that we hold at OSS Venture. The bottleneck to the synthesizer of Star Trek is not the process, it's the material. Meaning that you don't need 3D printing and a mill and some moldering and blah, blah, blah. You don't need like those 14 different processes in a box. If you have the right material that needs only 2 processes to do a variety of things. And then sending the instructions on how to transform matter is very easy. Like we have one company in Europe, they operate factories where there is 0 people and they can remote create any number of 200K SKU just by pressing a button and people can deliver it.
What's the name of that company? I need to connect them to Wayfair.
It's Cognix, and I will send it to you. But what is very interesting is that those 200K SKU, the constraint is not the information sending, the constraint is not the processes and blah, blah, blah. The constraint is having the right materials to expand the type of SKUs that they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at Nike, I was their head of innovation for quite a while. And one of the things that we were trying to build was Nike ID, the custom shoe that you can design.
Yeah.
The hard part of that was never letting people design whatever they want and being able to like do all the models and all the cut patterns and all that for it. It was, how do we get purple, green, gold, blah, 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 all the different materials to each factory that might make that. So we actually started down an interesting process though. We rethought how a shoe is built entirely. And that led to 3 major innovations. The fly knit upper, which is a knit upper one piece instead of being like 20. The, I think they call it Lunaron later, or lunar sole, but instead of being air soles, it was the lunar soles because that was one thing. And then it was like sonic welding for the different parts together instead of stitching. And that was all so we could do it faster. And it pushed a lot of, so we could get it closer to customers, we could do more things. And I do think rethinking the products themselves along those lines creates its own set of innovations, which is very positive. But you're absolutely right. If you can't get the base materials to that place where the thing's going to be manufactured, you're no better off. And our supply chains are still built for raw materials to go one way.
Exactly. And so one of the biggest innovations of Tesla is that they reduced the raw material variety needed for the car. And they verticalized a lot of the supply chain. And so that's how they got through the COVID supply chain disruptions and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And so they thought the product with more constraint on the raw material at start. And we think that in the next 10 to 20 years, innovation in materials is going to be so huge that it unlocks the rest because the bottleneck is that.
I hear you. That's a very good point. I did not realize that many innovations have already been made in that space because what's interesting about that is it gets buried in everything you buy. You don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
But you have more comfortable shoes, you have shirts with less seams in them, all kinds of, there was a commercial when I was a kid that was like, we don't make the products you buy, we make the products you buy better. And it reminds me of that because that was a material sciences company, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting because a lot of this is driven by AI. I think 2024 is on track to be the first year where more new materials are discovered by robots than by humans. So it's starting. For drugs, it was true in 23. It's already true for drugs. Now it will be true for materials.
Wow.
And so it's a good space to be in because when that fundamental innovation happens at such a deep level, it changed the whole supply chain.
Absolutely. I want to keep this conversation going for hours and hours and hours, but I can't because we are running out of time rapidly, and I want to give you a couple minutes to just say some last words to the audience.
For sure. So at OSS Venture, we launch and build software and hardware companies for the operational world. We invested in 20 companies. They are live in 2,200 industrial sites. We are doing 25 million ARR, and we are looking only for 3 things, which is incredible founders wanting to partner with us and change the world of operations. 2 are industrials. We work closely with industrials. We go to their factories. I have a 20 people team. We went to 860 factories in the last 4 years physically. all over the world. And so we get our data point from the ground up. So if any industrial is listening to this and saying, sounds interesting, you can contact us. And the third is we are closing an investment fund. It will be announced next week. So I think it will be already old news when the podcast goes live, but it's one of the biggest funds in France. So we are very proud of that.
Renan, that's fantastic having you on. I will have you on again if you're interested. I'd love to go deeper into any one of the companies you're invested in, topics you want to go into. Love having you on. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious. Thank you for listening. If you are new here and enjoyed the content, please subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are a regular listener, thanks so much for your continued support.
Overwhelmed by tech debt? Discover Vala AI, the solution to tech challenges with the simplicity of a click. No engineering background? No problem. Vala AI enables anyone to effortlessly tackle tech issues, freeing up your time from tech headaches. Make tech debt vanish with Vala AI, where your tech solutions are just a click away.